Who is your friend? Don't say, let's see, you shall regret it. On my blood, security team then. Zap, this is dog nature, we had enough, are you guys crazy, or just dumb? I let your people look at you and answer the question for me. It's a 1-2 combo, not only one hit, watch the video.
On the 13th of December 2003, former dictator of Iraq Saddam Hussein was found. He had evaded capture since the start of the American invasion of Iraq, but was found following a massive operation. His trial was mired by outbursts, assassinations, and ended with Saddam and many of his former officials sentenced to death. It is perhaps helpful to start with a brief explanation as to the regime of Saddam Hussein. Saddam ruled Iraq from 1979 until 2003, when he was deposed by an American-led invasion. His rule was noted for an almost gangster-like administration and for his failed attempts to annex neighbouring countries. The brutal Iran-Iraq War, which lasted from 1980 until 1988, claimed the lives of as many as 1.2 million people and saw some of the most brutal fighting of the 21st century. Saddam oversaw the use of chemical weapons against his own people, notably against the Kurds of northern Iraq in the Anfal genocides, where his regime murdered tens of thousands of people. Saddam annexed neighbouring Kuwait, triggering the First Gulf War. An international coalition soundly defeated the Iraqi army. However, Saddam remained in power. The widespread torture of civilians, suspected backing of terrorists responsible for 9/11, and his suspected development and ownership of weapons of mass destruction were the reasons given for the controversial Second Gulf War. In March of 2003, an American and British-led invasion sought to remove Saddam from power. Those within his inner circle, and those who had assisted in the brutal regime, were targets too for removal. As part of the kit provided, American soldiers were given a standard deck of cards, detailing the 52 most wanted members of Saddam's regime. This was to help American soldiers identify key and wanted members of the regime. The most wanted were found on the high-value cards, being the aces and the kings. Saddam himself was found on the ace of spades, being the most wanted. When the capital of Baghdad fell to the American control in April, Saddam could not be found. There were unfounded and unverified sightings of the dictator, but nothing led anywhere. There would be sporadic recorded messages from Saddam, distributed to encourage his forces to continue the fight and denounce the invaders. One notable example is following the deaths of his son Uday and Qusay. In a taped speech, he honoured the deaths of his sons, calling them honoured martyrs, and stating that he would be proud to offer 100 more sons to defeat the American forces. Operation Red Dawn was the name given to the hunt for Saddam Hussein. The 9-month hunt saw hundreds of soldiers conduct hundreds of raids. Intelligence officers began targeting lower-ranking functionaries, the likes of cooks, bodyguards, and drivers and their families. These kinds of people were targeted for details as to where Saddam might be hiding. The goal was to narrow down the areas where he could be hiding, with his birthplace of Tikrit being thought as a likely location. It would not be until December of 2003 that a breakthrough was reached. One of Saddam's former drivers divulged the name Mohammed Ibrahim Omar al-Muslit, otherwise known as Saddam's right-hand man. Al-Muslit's family were located and interrogated, allowing intelligence officers to then locate and interrogate the man himself. The American forces were told of a farm in Ad-Dar, only a short drive from Tikrit. On the 13th of December 2003, around 600 members of the Elite Special Operations Task Force Team 121 and the 1st Brigade Combat Team of the US Army's 4th Infantry Division set out to locate Saddam at the farm. His 2 remaining bodyguards attempted to flee, though they were soon captured. After a long search of the area, Saddam was located in a spider hole. The entrance was camouflaged with a rug, bricks and dirt, and was a space only a few feet long. When the troops opened the trapdoor, they were met with a bedraggled Saddam wishing to surrender. He was found with $750,000 in $100 bills. He was armed with a pistol and an AK-47, yet no shot was fired. There is a photograph of Saddam's capture, which shows an Iraqi-American interpreter named Samir holding Saddam on the ground. This man reportedly punched Saddam in the face and cursed him for the murder of his uncles and cousins, and the imprisonment of his father, a punch that I imagine felt rather satisfying. Saddam was arrested and designated as a prisoner of war, as the head of the regime's military. He was taken to the Baghdad International Airport, where he underwent a medical examination, which controversially was broadcast as proof of his arrest. It showed a disheveled Saddam with overgrown hair and an unkempt beard. This was met with criticism, as it was seen to humiliate the dictator and potentially be a violation of Article 3C of the Geneva Convention, which prohibits outrages on personal dignity. In Article 13, it states that prisoners of war must be protected against insults and public curiosity, which the broadcasting of the inspection could have breached. Saddam was put on trial in the Iraqi Special Tribunal, a court to pass judgment on the regime's key members for crimes committed against the Iraqi people. From the start of the trial, Saddam denounced its legitimacy. He called American President George W. Bush a criminal, stating that the trial was only a way for Bush to succeed in his re-election. During the trial, Saddam's lawyers were routinely assassinated, with many working from outside of Iraq for fear of their own safety. The actual safety of the trial brought into question whether it could ever be considered a fair or effective hearing. In the end, Saddam was sentenced for the murder of 148 Shiite Muslims in the Dujel massacre. This massacre was a retaliation for the attempted assassination against Saddam, and proved to be the crime which he was sentenced to death for. On the 5th of November 2006, he was sentenced to death by hanging. Upon receiving his sentence, Saddam shouted, "Long live the people! Long live the Arab nation! Down with spies! God is great!" Saddam attempted to appeal his sentence, but on the 26th of December 2006, his appeal was rejected, with moves to execute the dictator as soon as possible. At American base Camp Justice, Saddam was to be hanged. On the 30th of December 2006, balaclava-clad executioners led Saddam to the noose and placed it over his head. Amid the chanting of slogans, insults, and prayers read from the Quran, the former dictator dropped to his death. His final moments were captured on mobile phone, the opening of the trapdoor, his body swinging and neck twisted. Saddam's body was then flown to his birthplace and buried in the dead of night. The death of Saddam was a footnote in the regime and an attempt to legitimize the new Iraqi government. There were questions as to the fairness of the trial, leading plenty to believe that it was nothing but a show trial. And as for the little pack of cards I mentioned earlier in the video, not all of those in the deck of cards faced justice. The crimes of Saddam and his regime were many, and yet, whether justice was achieved, both for the victims and for Iraq, I will leave to you. But it is believed that Saddam's regime is responsible for the deaths of 250,000 people.
that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. And I saw a great white throne, and him that sat on it, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled away, and there was found no place for them. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life, and the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books according to their works. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them, and they were judged every man according to their works. And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. And whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire.
Then I saw a great white throne, and him who was seated on it. Earth and sky fled from his presence, and there was no place for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and books were opened. Another book was opened, which is the book of life. The dead were judged according to what they had done, as recorded in the books. The sea gave up the dead that were in it, and death and Hades gave up the dead that were in them, and each person was judged according to what he had done. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. The lake of fire is the second death. If anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying,
Now the dwelling of God is with men, and he will live with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away.
He who was seated on the throne said,
I am making everything new.
Then he said,
Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true.
He said to me,
It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To him who is thirsty, I will give to drink without cost from the spring of the water of life. He who overcomes will inherit all this, and I will be his God, and he will be my son.